2.2 stratospheric ozone. So the stratospheric ozone is a key component of the atmospheric system because it protects living systems from the negative effects of ultraviolet radiation. And so there's different types of ultraviolet radiation. Luckily, it filters out mostly UVC, which happens to be the most harmful ultraviolet radiation. Some of this UV is actually good for you. So UVA helps give you vitamin D, which is why it's important to go outside, and also why sometimes in the wintertime when it's really dark out, people have seasonal affective disorder, SAD, SAD, because they're not getting as much of that vitamin D. Human activities have disturbed the dynamic equilibrium of stratospheric ozone formation. So the amount of ozone changes over time as it's being created and destroyed by UV light, which is actually how it absorbs that UV light in the creation and the destruction. Really cool. But the CFCs and other ozone depleting substances, ODCs or ODS, are what break down that ozone. And break the balance of the equilibrium. So pollution management strategies can be employed to conserve stratospheric ozone. So we could look at those three levels from figure 3. We could try to eliminate the source of those ozone depleting substances. We could minimize their release or come up with alternatives to them. And then we could try to remove them from the atmosphere as well. So some of the ultraviolet radiation from the sun is absorbed by the ozone, causing the molecule to break apart and then actually reform under normal conditions. This is the dynamic equilibrium, right? It's being created and it's being destroyed at the same time, but things are all good because there's eventually some sort of balance in there. Ozone depleting substances prevent that. And they increase the destruction of ozone, which then causes more ultraviolet light to pass through and then has all those negative health effects on critters and other living organisms too. So we got different types of ozone depleting substances here. CFCs and HCFCs are the most common, but halons and some other substances, methyl bromide here, come from fire extinguishers, pesticides, etc. Good to have CFCs, but also like one or two other examples in your back pocket. We got some examples of what ultraviolet light can do. It could cause cataracts, makes your vision super cloudy. And actually we see a lot of this in Malawi. Sunglasses are like such a high priority commodity, like not even a commodity, it's like a necessity, right? Like there's so many people out in the sun all the time without that eye protection that cataracts is like a really common issue over there. You could have effects like skin cancer and other types of damage to your living tissue, damage to your DNA. And this happens to other living organisms too. Damages photosynthetic material in producers, especially can affect phytoplankton. You could look at this diagram and consider how the decrease in phytoplankton might have other compounding effects on organisms that eat the phytoplankton. We could look at the different levels or the different tiers of pollution management again with some of these solutions. So you might try to think, how is recycling refrigerants an example of tier 2? How is developing alternatives, tier 1, etc. Yeah, this is like 100% how the IB always does their exam, and this is how the mock exam is going to be too. There is an illegal market for some ozone depleting substances. However, the Montreal Protocol and other agreements have had like such dramatic effects. I mean, like you can see the amount of production dropping just like so dramatically. Another little slide about the Montreal Protocol. Yeah, we're lucky how great of an example this was, and sort of unlucky because since the example was so good, a lot of people kind of, I don't know, it seems like people think that, oh, this one was easy, so all the rest of them will be easy too. It's usually not this simple. So some examples of questions or skills you might need to have could be like evaluating the role of national and international organizations in reducing the emissions of ozone depleting substances. So the Montreal Protocol did have a large decrease in ODS, ozone depleting substances, but there's also still a lot of illegal use. Maybe not every country signed it, etc. But really good examples of international mindedness here, especially because the ozone exists over the whole planet, and the thinness of the ozone, the thin layer, is mostly over Antarctica, which is still largely international in its domain. Shout out to Mr. KramerScience.com.